28 листопада працює медіа-центр Україна. Мене звати Світлана.
It's November 28. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko. Ukraine Media Center welcomes you. And now we will have a press conference about the presence of Russia in the information field of Russia. And joining us in a studio is our online and offline guests. First, Ihor Karpechenko, the chairman of the NGO Laboratory of Research and Information, and also joining us online will be Mykhailo Panaiotov, TV journalist, expert of NGO Laboratory of Research and Information Analysis, and Ștefan Bejan, investigative journalist, TVA channel. So, Mr. Ihor, it's a pleasure to welcome you at Ukraine Media Center. Can you please tell us about the research that you've conducted? So, how was it held? Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. So this survey, it was taken this year. It covered the period starting from the beginning of the year and probably until the fall. And we wanted to study how the Russian misinformation about Ukraine enters the information space of Moldova, what media infrastructure is used by the Russian propagandists to brainwash the citizens of Moldova. And we were analyzing a number of areas. We were analyzing online media. We were covering Telegram channels. And also we've analyzed the information activity of Russian diplomats and inside Moldova, what they were saying about Ukraine. And to explain why we were curious about this topic, I would like to demonstrate you one slide. The results of the sociological survey held by a Romanian company IMAS in Moldova, and they were asking. It was held back in July 2024. So in Moldova, they were asking the people who, or how the people, what was their outlook of the war in Ukraine, whether the world should support or should not support Ukraine. And we found out that about 50% of the citizens of Moldova are supporting the idea that Ukraine should not be helped. Almost half were answering that they're against Ukraine fighting for its independence. More than a half, I think 53%, were saying that Russia is supposed to win and they should keep the temporarily occupied territories. And when I personally saw those data, I wanted to understand why. Why exactly? Because we have a lot of ties with Moldova. Even between the regular people, how come it turned out they are thinking completely different? They also understand that there are historic ties with Ukraine. Part of the Moldovan citizens are currently working in Russia. Well, it's clear, but still the situation should not be looking so catastrophic. Moldova was standing apart among all of the Ukrainian neighbors. And we've analyzed the content of what Russian propagandists were saying in Moldova, and we've come to the conclusion that within that period of the year 2024, the major part of all of the messages promoted through the media, through online media, through social media, was focused around a number of missions. And one of such missions, well, the most frequently they try to miscredit Ukraine, Ukrainian government in the eyes of Moldovan citizens, including the armed forces of Ukraine. They keep spreading those cliches like Nazis, fascists, they kill, and that flow is flowing like on a daily basis. If we analyze all of the publications in the media, about 15% in online media 15% of all of the information is dedicated to Ukraine, Ukrainian military. And when it comes to Telegram channels, specifically the anonymous Telegram channels, more than a half accounts for information about Ukraine. However, the target audience is in Moldova. And another task that we were setting for ourselves is blocking of Ukrainian grains export through Moldova. Very frequently, the messages were broadcasted about blocking of Polish border, and very frequently we were coming across the facts of misinformation campaigns dated 2023 when they were spreading the messages in Poland and Bulgaria about the poisoned grain and so on and so forth. However, Ukraine debunked that myth immediately, so those pieces of misinformation were spread too. Also, quite skillfully, Russian propaganda speculates on the fears of the Moldovan citizens, their fears of war. And Russian media, Russian speakers, along with the anonymous Telegram channels, they emphasize that if Moldova helps Ukraine, there will be war for sure. Should Ukraine strike in the depth of Russia, the war will come on a larger scale and the Moldovan citizens will suffer. And they were speculating on Transnistria topic, like the cooperation between Ukraine and Moldova for settlement of Transnistria issue. They turned it inside out, and they were saying that Ukraine and Moldova are the ones who are trying to provoke yet another Transnistrian conflict. However, the situation looks completely different from the angle of Ukraine and Moldova, as they say that the Transnistria issue should be solved in a peaceful manner. And yet another block is them trying to continue telling about Russian soldiers, invincible Russian army. And in this block of issues, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that they try to invert the reality, to say that it's not them who are aggressors, that it's Ukraine who is the aggressor, who is attacking, inflicting strikes. However, it seems to me that sane people should understand, and they do understand, that they're calling white black and black white. However, in Moldova, those cliches, those seeds are falling into fruitful soil, or fertile soil, and that's one of the parts of the answer to our questions. Do you have an answer how those narratives are being spread? What are the tools used for that? Yeah, we have this information. I've already covered online media in part, and Stefan will tell you in more detail about the Telegram channels. In Moldova, starting from the February 2022, the government has realized they've learned on our mistakes, and they started gradually blocking those channels of Russian misinformation that were real numerous. I'm talking not only about official Russian mass media, but also other websites, TV channels. And in the year 2022, for the first time in Moldova, however, in Europe it's been, I think, 3 years that Sputnik and Russia Today have been blocked. But in Moldova, only back in 2022, the first 2 Russian websites were blocked, those who were spreading Russian misinformation, Sputnik and Gagauz News. Gagauz News is quite an interesting online editorial that belongs to a Gagauzian autonomy in Moldova businessman who has ties with criminals staying in Moscow, Grigory Karamola. Back in 2023, I think about 2 dozens of Russian media were banned in Moldova, along with TV channels. So in the year 23, they banned the most of them: Lenta.ru, Komsomolska Pravda, and other websites who were broadcasting Russian misinformation, which was a significant blow on the capabilities of Russian propaganda in Moldova. Still, they take some measures to circumvent those bans. So here's the picture, how Russian misinformation is getting into Moldovan information space. The channels that were blocked in the years 23-24, in the beginning of the year 24, the information from them now goes through the media that belongs to local politicians and oligarchs, like Ilan Shor, who is the founder of the blog The Victory, and Gagauzian politician Viktor Petrov, who is the owner of Gagauz News, an online editorial. Also, there are branches of Russian outlets, such as Bloknot Moldova, functioning in the territory of Moldova so far, which are part of Russian network Bloknot, and also which is quite surprising to me, through the Communist Party websites, a lot of information is entering the information space of the Moldovan Republic, and Russian special services are working there too, most likely, because we've identified quite an interesting network called ZOV that comprises about 20 news websites with the same name but under different domains. So they are the aggregator websites who gather all of the information flow from Russian online media and channels it to the Moldovan media space. Also, Moldovan oligarch media, Ilan Shor, those media that belonged to him that were blocked in 2023, so they started changing their domain names and they switched to online, having created a network of copies. The situation was similar when we were analyzing the Bulgarian media space. They make a lot of copies of the same website to circumvent the bans, to promote their narratives in the social media. And currently, for TV channel Moldova 24 that belongs to Ilan Shor, they've created a lot of domain names: MD Moldova TV, Moldova 24, M24, MD, and through all those networks, this misinformation is entering the Moldovan media space. And thus, they managed to cover more than 1 million subscribers in the Republic of Moldova. So such countries as Moldova, Bulgaria, they are post-Soviet countries. A lot of people still use Russian language there. They watch content in Russian. So those sources that we're discussing now, are they Russian speaking, or are they aimed at the audience that uses Moldovan language? Well, they're mostly Russian speaking, but back in 24 we've seen them having created Romanian speaking and English speaking channels to expand their audience, to expand their coverage. For example, this ZOV network, it started with Transnistria, and I'm thinking they have ties with the special services of Russian Federation. So they've established copies in English and Romanian language. However, they spread their misinformation in Moldova and, interestingly, in France. So that was pretty curious to find out. Well, how is the spreading of the narratives, their intensity, how are they related with the elections process that was going on in Moldova recently? Well, we were mostly analyzing the content related to Ukraine. However, such networks as short TV channels, it was established for this elections campaign. And during the election campaign, we've identified two misinformation campaigns that were related directly to Ukraine. So they were solving two issues, issue of Ukraine and Moldova. I'll get back to them a little bit later. So there were two information campaigns that were accusing President of Moldova of organizing the transit of materials to biolaboratories with battle gaze and battle mosquitoes. And also they were scaring the citizens of Moldova that they can place Ukrainian F-16s in the airfields of Moldova to inflict strikes over Russia. And this is how they linked it, that the current authority, the President Sandu, they were accused of helping Ukraine, so they were tangling those tasks together, thus solving both Moldovan and Ukrainian issue. Yeah, Russia works on the electorate who will influence the political decisions. So let's probably proceed to the examples of the companies that were launched. Well, I've already told you about two campaigns. First, about the biolabs in Ukraine and transit of biomaterials through Moldova. But in reality, we were analyzing other misinformation campaigns previously. They were not long-lasting, but in this case, we've seen that this misinformation campaign was broken down in a number of phases. For example, biolaboratory campaign, it was launched in the beginning of August from anonymous sources. There is one website, I'm not gonna call its name. It's an anonymous website where anyone can place any message. And there was a journalist investigation placed there about biolabs in Ukraine, transit of biomaterials, and those materials were being spreaded like after 15 or 20 minutes in the websites that belong to Moldovan opposition parties. Well, not opposition parties. I think that it may sound offensive to other oppositional parties, but the parties of Ilan Shor, who is handling those resources, they had Censor MD website, and then they renamed it into 1984.md, and it was added as a part of all this pool of web resources spreading misinformation campaigns. And they were saying that the President Sandu was directly responsible for organizing the transit of biomaterials. So the first wave was in the beginning of August, and then by the end of August, there was a speech of Lieutenant General Kirillov, a representative of CBRN forces of Russia, who was broadcasting it in Moldovan TV, another wave of misinformation campaign, who was saying that we have facts of this transit of biomaterials. And now, to expand the coverage, they've added Russian media sources to those Moldovan ones that they were using before. And through Telegram channels, they were rocking the situation through the Telegram channels, through websites that is the direct fault of President Sandu, so don't vote for her. Another campaign that I've mentioned about the F-16 fighter jets, when there was a discussion in Europe whether Ukraine should or should not have been provided them. And in January 2024, Russian Telegram channels, or the Telegram channels affiliated with Russia, have launched a campaign that the Minister of Defense of Moldova said that Ukrainian F-16s will be staying in Moldovan airfields, and they will take off from there to inflict strikes on Russian territory. And this information was spread mostly through the Telegram channels. Then in February, there was a fabricated letter as if of Dmitro Kuleba, in which he was writing to his Moldovan colleague about placement of F-16 fighter jets in the airfields of Moldova. And then in the Russian websites, it was mentioned that Ukrainian media have reported that Ukrainian F-16s would be staying in Moldova. So this misinformation campaign was lasting from January all the way up to October, and it only lasted in autumn when Moldovan experts in Moldovan TV were saying, remember that piece of information about placement of Ukrainian F-16s in Moldovan airfields that would escalate the situation. Thank you, Mr. Ihor. I suggest we continue talking about Telegram and about what's going on in Moldovan information space. And I'm asking Mr. Ștefan to join us. Mr. Ștefan, can you please tell us what is the way that the network of Russian-affiliated Telegram channels is operating in Moldova? What are the narratives that you're tracing? How does all this misinformation system operates in Moldova? Well, I apologize, I don't speak Ukrainian, but I can understand about 70 to 80% of what you were saying. As Ihor has mentioned, in the beginning of year 2024, with the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, in Moldova, the government started banning the channels broadcasting Russian propaganda. It started with 4, Sputnik, and by now about 16 or 18 TV channels were shut down, along with a couple of hundreds of websites, including Russian websites such as RIA Novosti and so on and so forth. So Russian propaganda has taken a different path to broadcast their misinformation and fakes, and one of those ways is Telegram channels. So I've analyzed a couple of hundreds of such Telegram channels. What's interesting, the majority of them was established before the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and the majority, if you analyze them, you can see that they have common command center, or maybe a couple of common command centers that are based in Russia, or I would say even Kremlin. Also, what's interesting, some Telegram channels, I apologize, were established before the 24th of February 2022, and they completely changed their rhetorics after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For example, I've taken one Telegram channel, Mama Liga Ipakana. It was created back in 2019, and it was saying previously that Ilan Shor is an exponent of Russia in Moldova. Also, the channel was saying that Ilan Shor is a beneficiary of a big multi-billion scandal in Moldova. It was saying that Shor is a criminal, and so on and so forth. And then, in autumn 2022, when the pro-Russian large-scale protests have started in Chisinau in Moldova, our journalists were commenting those protests. They were saying that people were paid to come to those protests. So that channel started broadcasting pro-Shor, pro-Russian narratives. So all those narratives started emerging in that channel. So we've come to the conclusion that Shor started buying everything that could be sold. in Moldovan media market. Telegram channels, websites, TV channels, everything. And this Telegram channel, Mama Liga и Tukana, is only one of them, but there are numerous. Numerous is the number of those channels broadcasting misinformation, and this is the media war offshore against the government of Moldova, the government of Maya Sandu. Sure doesn't only want to miscredit the government of Maya Sandu, her current government, but his goal, just like the goal of Russia, is to dethrone this government and to install a pro-Russian government with an anti-Ukrainian sentiment, to transform them into anti-Ukrainian agents so that Moldova stands against Ukraine. That's why through Telegram channels the Moldovans are being scared by those messages that Maya Sandu with Romanians, with Zelensky, want to get Moldova engaged in this war. For example, one narrative is saying that they want to launch F-16s from Moldovan airfields to inflict strikes on Russia, and Russia will be forced to respond by bombarding the territory of Moldova. Yet another narrative is that there are chemical weapons coming to Ukraine through Bulgaria, including biolabs, that Ukraine wants to attack Transnistria in coordination with Moldova to seize the ammunition stored in Kabasa, one of the biggest ammunition depots. Yeah, it was stationed there, one of the biggest ammunition depots in Eastern Europe. So all those narratives are being spread through the Telegram channels. How does it actually function? Well, there's a number of methods. For example, first, some narrative, say Maria Zakharova or other Russian officials, they mention it, and then the Moldovan Telegram channels pick up that information and start spreading it to Moldovan media space. So the TV channels are taking the information from those websites and they make news, and other clean websites, those who don't openly spread Russian propaganda, they take that information from those pro-Russian websites and start spreading it too. Or otherwise, such pro-Russian narratives are being broadcasted by local Moldovan politicians from Shore Party, former Shore Party, Moldovan Socialist Party, either through their official Telegram channels or anonymous Telegram channels that they manage. Because one of the biggest advantages of Telegram is its anonymity. We cannot find out who is behind those Telegram channels. We cannot penalize them or how do you put it in Russian? The hatred, like penalize them for hatred to the people, or even convict them for that, for inciting that hatred. Another nuance that I want to mention, something that we were not covering in our investigation, but since now there were elections in Romania that everybody is discussing. Another source of misinformation that has emerged both in Moldova and Romania and all around the world is TikTok, and we see the Russian narratives being spread, Russian misinformation being spread through TikTok, and there are indirect evidences that Elon Shore, along with Kremlin, are behind those misinformation messages. They were buying former journalists, they were paying to the people who currently live in Germany, in Italy, and through TikTok, they are telling us they try to scare us with the war, they try to scare us with the anti-Ukrainian propaganda, and then their bots are spreading that information, making it real viral. We have some TikTokers such as Gabriel Kalin, like Sergei Banar, who have more than million views in TikToks. There are videos in TikTok, only and only one of those videos has more than million views. So TikTok started becoming a real threat for our country, and I think for Europe in general, because we understand that Moldova is a small country, and in this context, Russia has a lot of interest to Moldova, because pro-Russian Moldova means huge problems for Ukraine as well. We realize it. We realize why Russia invested millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in our presidential campaign. They were trying to buy about 300,000 votes, 15% of all those who voted. I would even say 20%, not 15. And we try to counter Russian misinformation, and we think that until this moment we were sort of making it, but still we're having huge problems. Mr. Stefan, I would like to get back to the matter of Telegram channels. You've mentioned that you've analyzed a couple of hundreds of Kremlin-affiliated Telegram channels. In your opinion, what is the number of such Telegram channels spreading anti-Ukrainian propaganda, those controlled by Kremlin, spreading pro-Kremlin narratives? What is the number of them operating in Moldova? Well, it's difficult to say, because every day their number is growing. Even before the elections in Moldova, a couple of such Telegram channels were shut down. One of the biggest ones was Gagauzien Republic. We know for sure that it was puppeted from Crimea, from Kremlin, and it was clear that people who were writing in these Telegram channels, they do not originate from Gagauzia, because it was clear they don't understand the Moldovan realities. And that Telegram channel had about 50,000 subscribers, which is a huge number for Moldova. It was one of the biggest Telegram channels. I think it was one in top 5. But their number is growing. As I've said previously, Shure keeps buying whatever is being sold. There is quite an interesting fact. About a month ago, one news website in Facebook was announcing that it's for sale for $50,000, and then this announcement expired, which makes me think that the buyer was found pretty quickly. And the idea is that many Moldovans read those Telegram channels, and many of those Telegram channels, they're inflated. We can clearly see it just for the sake of reporting, so that they can report to Kremlin that they have this huge number of subscribers, such a broad audience, and stuff. Thank you, Mr. Stefan, for sharing these important insights, and I suggest we give the floor to Mr. Mykhailo about another area of this survey, the spread of Russian and pro-Kremlin narratives through official channels. Mr. Mykhailo, please join us and tell us how does it work and how efficient is this method of propaganda. Good afternoon. Today I would like to provide you with an analysis of the embassy of the Republic of Bulgaria in Moldova. And in the center of my attention, there will be an official Telegram channel that is one of the Kremlin tools for spreading misinformation and propaganda. After analyzing it within the period from January to September this year, I've identified a number of patterns and trends. Give me a sec here. Can you see the presentation? So it's information activities of Russian embassy in Chisinau, the analysis of propaganda and misinformation spreading. So the embassy of Russian Federation in Chisinau uses its official Telegram channel for spreading propaganda and misinformation, specifically about Ukraine. A total number of publications within the period of January through September this year is 259, and 39% of them are anti-Ukrainian, are clearly anti-Ukrainian. And now let's proceed to the detailed analysis of the messages in this Telegram channel. The goal of Russian embassy is to undermine the Ukrainian positions in Ukraine, to incite anti-Ukrainian sentiment in Moldova. And with the help of this Telegram channel, the embassy doesn't only broadcast the information, but creates a propaganda machine that creates an image of Ukraine as of a country which threatens the relations between Moldova and its neighbors. And they built an image of Russia as a defender against Ukrainian aggression and extremism. So I've identified a number of narratives that the embassy is using for creating anti-Ukrainian propaganda. Depicting Ukraine as aggressor and a terrorist state is one of the key narratives. Ukraine as a Nazi state, Ukraine as a Western puppet, and support of the concept of humanitarian mission of Russia, saying that Russia helps Ukraine, it doesn't kill it. A constant accent of the historical unity of Russia and Ukraine, critics of the social economic situation in Ukraine, anti-Western rhetorics as a foundation of fight against Ukraine. So all those narratives that Kremlin is trying to push to Moldovan audience. So criticizing of social economic situation in Ukraine through everyday bombing of Ukrainian infrastructure by Russia, for example. Today we're seeing it again. Russia also uses it for disruption of social economic situation in Moldova as well, which is dependent on Russia. And yet another narrative is anti-Western rhetorics. as a basis for war with Ukraine, and another narrative that was intensified lately, the accent on the nuclear force of Russia. It was intensified after this recent strike with the Russian missile Oreshnik. And how does the Russian propaganda call Ukraine in their publications? Is Kyiv regime, neo-Nazi regime, fascist state, a Western marionette, aggressor, terroristic state, anti-Russian project, radical regime, and Western colony? The activity of the Telegram channel of Russian embassy in the Republic of Moldova is one of the tools for spreading propaganda, but it's not a key tool for spreading propaganda. Russia also uses other Telegram channels that Stefan mentioned before, and comparing this survey to our previous survey covering the activities of Russian Federation in Republic of Bulgaria, we may say that in the media space of Moldova, Russia, through their official sources such as website and Facebook page, is not as active as in Bulgaria. There is a regional specifics about Bulgaria. The Bulgarians, they spread more time in Facebook, and Russia is using it as one of the channels to spread their propaganda. Meanwhile, in Moldova, we can see that both Facebook is not as active, and Russian channels, official channels, are not as active in Facebook, and Telegram is also one of the tools. However, it's not a key tool. And meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia is using its Telegram channel, the official Telegram channel, making reposts of other affiliated channels. The key anti-Ukrainian publications are coming specifically from this Telegram channel and other anonymous sources that broadcast misinformation and manipulations about Ukraine. And again, it's a consistent misinformation strategy of anti-Ukrainian propaganda, which is based on Ukrainian historic context, creating the image of Russia as a defender. The propaganda in Russia is aimed at formulation of such reality in which Ukraine and its allies looks as an aggressor and Russia looks as a defender with a historic responsibility. And these Telegram channels use ancient methods such as Tikwakwa or its modern interpretation, such as whataboutism, to entangle the situation and complicate the objective discussion of actual events. Thus, the embassy actively works on popularization of pro-Russian sentiment in Moldova and reinforces perception of Ukraine as a disrupting factor, trying to disrupt the situation in the Eastern Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Mykhailo. I think that the biggest threat of this embassy Telegram channel, that unlike other Telegram channels that Stefan has mentioned, it's an official source, and the journalists of a reputed media, they have a full professional right to refer to this source of information. According to your observations, how frequent are such references in Moldovan media? How frequently do they refer the Russian embassy Telegram channel? Well, the Moldovan media, the pro-Russian Moldovan media, more frequently use quoting through direct Russian information sources such as TRT, Russia Today. For example, the official Telegram channel in Moldova, it's not as active, and the Moldovan pro-Russian journalists don't use it too frequently for referencing. Thank you very much, Mr. Mykhailo, for this interesting information. Mr. Ihor, what we're seeing here is the systemic nature, I mean, for what we see in official messages, Telegram channels, TV. So it's an elaborate system for spreading those narratives. Has this system started spreading like within the last 3 years of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, or has it been built decades before? Well, you know, based on the research that we've conducted in Bulgaria and Moldova, we may say that this system was being built way, way before the full-scale invasion, before the Revolution of Dignity. For example, in Bulgaria, there is a network of websites that has been created decades ago, because such network cannot be created in one day or 1 month. When it comes to Moldova, what we see is they adapt to the resolutions of the Moldovan government. They switch domains, they try to evade the bans, and they try to continue broadcasting that propaganda. The only thing I would like to add to what Mykhailo has mentioned, and you said about the diplomats, the cliches that you were seeing that they use against Ukraine, we have to understand it, that they are used by the official diplomats that use not quite diplomatic terms. And secondly, is the diplomats who are violating the Vienna Convention. They try to interfere the Moldovan internal politics, the bilateral relations between Moldova and Ukraine. It's a violation of a Vienna Convention. We have to remember it. Also, I need to add that actually countering these systemic phenomena should never end. We should continue identifying the Telegram channels, debunking those narratives, and it's an everyday routine. Yeah, it's not enough to shut down 20 sources. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the floor, either online or offline? If you have any questions, so I would like to ask our technical team to pass the mic to the floor.
Cremonesi, writing for the major Italian daily Corriere della Sera. Sir, I have a kind of a general question, because I have to say that after almost 3 years of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you know, you can mention all the propaganda, which is of course present in all Europe, not only in Moldavia or in Bulgaria, but it's astonishing to see the growth of pro-Russian movements in Moldavia. I mean, you know, Ms. Sandu, we thought she would have won the election easily, and she barely made it. In Georgia, they're quite strong, and in Romania. And even in Poland now, you have very strong pro-Russian sentiment, which is astonishing if you think about the history of the relation between Poland and Russia. Very similar to Ukraine in this sense. So, okay, the propaganda is strong, but they are succeeding very well. How do you explain? There must be something more deeper than that. And what are you think the one or two main arguments of the Russian propaganda through Telegram, through different means, which are really working? Thank you.
We mentioned at the beginning of our presentation that several subjects that Russian propaganda uses in Moldova works. It depends. It seems to me depends on historical relations between countries, and the people in Moldova believe Russian more than other countries. I think so.
Did you get your answer? Just a second, microphone.
Which is quite worrying because it's already 30 years now that the Moldovan are separate from the Soviet Union. And so you are telling us that in Moldavia, people believe more to the Russian propaganda than the pro-Western propaganda. And then what about Romania? I mean, can you tell me briefly, among the Russian arguments, which are in these different countries the most effective, which are convincing people to be pro-Putin and not pro-Europe?
I didn't told that everyone in Moldova believe Russia, but
Of course.
But it seems to me that 50-50. And what about argument? It's difficult to say you about Romania because we didn't analyze media in Romania, but the most frequently used in Moldova that Russia, the strong military state, and they will win in different wars.
Дякую дуже. Можливо, є ще запитання?
Thank you. Do we have any more questions on the floor? Then, if not, I would like to thank our guests. The results of your survey are real illustrative and interesting. Let me remind you, we had the presentation of the research results, Russian disinformation about Ukraine in the information space of Moldova and Ukraine media space. We'll be back in operation tomorrow, so keep track of our